As mentioned, I'm a disabilities counselor at Carleton, which is in Ottawa here. And I'm hoping to give a little bit of information on what you can look at in your job search, but as a student, so thinking ahead to your future career. And that's sort of my first point. I'm probably talking primarily to students or future students, possibly even past students who are imparting their knowledge now. But I think a big piece is not only to have your post-secondary education, but to pair that with work experience to lead you to a more meaningful career. Just quickly, why are we in post-secondary education? I thought I'd make the point. I have a graph here sort of indicating that the earnings of people with post-secondary education do tend to be higher, as well as the unemployment rate for people with a post-secondary education is much lower with that. But you may find in sort of looking beyond your post-secondary education in your job search, you see this job posting and it tells you a minimum of 2 to 3 years of relevant experience. In the posting itself, it says at least 2 years direct service experience or experience preferred. And as a new student or new graduate, how are you supposed to have this experience? You've been in post-secondary. How are you supposed to be gaining this meaningful experience? So why have work experience? The reason being is that there is more access to post-secondary education now than there may have been previously. And this graph is sort of showing, as you can see at the bottom, 2 colored lines there. There is an increase in people who are attending both college and university. And so your post-secondary education may not be as meaningful to access the job market if it's not going to be paired with meaningful work experience. I have sort of a picture here of a potential employee speaking to an employer, and the quote is, "I think you'd jump at the chance to hire me right out of college. I haven't been previously owned, so to speak." Yes, that's great, but that doesn't seem to be what employers are looking for. So what are the benefits of having work experience for the employer? They keep asking for it, but why are they asking? The first thing is that they may be looking at, can you apply what you're learning in school to the work setting? So you have all this great theoretical knowledge, but does it translate to practice for you? Are you able to take what you're learning in your textbooks and make it work in a work environment and make it meaningful to the employer? What will you contribute to the organization? So it's great you have this degree, but what can you do with it? What are you going to give to the employer? They're hiring for what you can do. So what is that? What strengths are you going to bring to their team specifically? So many employers now are having people work in teams. So what are you contributing to that team that's different than somebody else? What's unique about you? What do you have to offer them? And most importantly, can you do the work that you're hired for? And I have 2 pictures here. One is of presumably a civil engineer, and you can see that they've been working on different ends of a bridge, and when the bridge comes to meet, it doesn't match up. Clearly that's a problem when we're looking at construction and everything that's going beyond that. The second diagram is an employee talking to her employer, and she's doing some filing as part of her role, and she says, it's a simple system. I file everything under P for papers. Clearly, this theoretical knowledge that she's learned hasn't translated to practice. We have to also think about what are the benefits to you to have this work experience. It's not just what can you bring to the employer, but why would you want to gain work experience? For sure, the first one I would guess is financial reasons. Most employment is paid, and that's huge. When you're a student, you may have limited funding. Having a little bit of extra money in your pocket may take some of the stress or the financial burden away from you. Second point, of course, is a change of pace from academics. As you may know, we may not have tests beyond post-secondary. And when you get to work, you're not attending lectures every day. You're not doing your readings for classes. And so it's a big difference from the post-secondary environment, and it's kind of a nice change to just show up, do your work, and leaving and it's done. Also, can you bring context and meaning to your studies? So you're doing all this textbook learning, but you're not applying it. Having an opportunity to apply it can sometimes make it even easier for you to understand what you're learning. And really, you get a deeper understanding once you've applied your knowledge. It can help you learn more about the options available to you with your education. So, I have this great degree that I'm working towards, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it. What are people doing with, a degree in this or a diploma in that? What can you actually do in, a work setting? What are people doing with the similar education? You can also develop a sense of competence with the workplace learning. So you're learning this, you may learn skills in the job market that you can apply to your academics. You're going to have to be more organized. Well, that will also help you in your academics. You're going to have to gain a better sense of what a workplace is like. Well, that certainly can help you, more professionalism to your education. So there's benefits to working, and you can bring that back to your educational setting. It can also help you determine a future career. As you gain more information as to what people are doing with your degree or places that people are working, you may have a better sense of what you actually want to do when you're graduated. As opposed to your first job, you try something, you may not be what you like. If you've already had a bit of experience, it may translate to, I know what kind of jobs I want when I'm done. Of course, if you decide for whom you would like to work, you're probably going to be a bit happier as opposed to trying to find an employer that fits for you, an employer who meets your accommodation needs, who's open and understanding. Certainly that's going to be helpful once you're graduating and looking for full-time employment. And finally, the social participation. You can get caught up hanging out with your school friends, and then you get to a point where you're kind of sick of talking about your program all the time, and a work environment can give you an option of having other friends from different settings that maybe not even students, so they don't have that same stress that you're experiencing. But can you balance academics and work? And I want to touch on a few points, potential challenges for students with disabilities specifically. Of course, you may already be taking a reduced course load and you don't have time to work. And it can be very challenging. You're taking a reduced course load, you've extended your degree already. Do you really want to extend it further by adding part-time or some casual work to that? Because of your funding sources, you can't earn too much additional money, so you may be limited in how much you can be earning because of how you're being funded. You've never worked in your field or in a professional setting, and you don't know your disability-related needs. There may not be a disability services office like you have at college or university. So who do you go to when you have to talk about your accommodation needs? How do you advocate for yourself when you have no support from anybody? You don't have a coordinator supporting you. You don't have, your counselor that's helping you talk to your instructors. Your disability may be non-visible, and you don't know how to ask an employer for what you need to be successful. They may look at you and say, I don't see what the problem is. Just to go back to a point that I missed, you've never worked in your field or in a professional setting and talking about your disability-related needs, and you may not know for an employer what that means, a non-visible disability, making the connection to what your needs are. It may not be clear to them. And of course, not wanting to extend your degree program longer with a co-op or similar program. So there may be options with built-in work experience, but again, it's extending your program, and that could be, extending your funding needs as well. Okay? So just to kind of touch on how to gain some experience as a student. What's available within your institution? You guys are in school. What's available within that school? There may be a cooperative education program. There's some programs that have built-in internships, placements, apprenticeships. There may be experiential learning opportunities available, or research positions or teaching assistant positions. Paraprofessional roles, so a peer mentoring program or other assistance programs within the university. There may be a semester abroad option, so you're still following your post-secondary studies, but you're doing it in another country, and look at all the experience you can gain from that. And finally, there may be an alternate spring break program, so a time when you're already going to be off school, maybe there's something you can do within that short time period to, again, gain some work experience. Continuing on how to gain work experience as a student, what's available within your school or community? Are there temporary positions? Maybe there's occasional and seasonal positions. Of course, part-time opportunities, maybe the first one comes up, but also volunteer options. And volunteering is a way that you can gain work experience. You may not be getting paid. You may have more flexibility within that role, but certainly you're working in a professional setting, and there's the same skills as you would have if you're doing paid employment, and you may have more flexibility with that role. So maybe there are alternate work arrangements that can make balancing school and academics more manageable for you. Maybe there's flex time, so you don't necessarily know how you're going to feel in the morning. If you know that you have to go in for 5 hours at some point, that may be more manageable than having to go in from 12 to 5 every day. You may be able to job share, so you can't handle a full-time position and you can't handle maybe a part-time position, but maybe you can do half of that and share that with someone else, and then you're more able to balance a little bit of work experience with your education. Telecommuting or working from home with the internet and so many technologies available, that may be an option for you to be able to work from home. Or time-shared workspace, where you're sharing your workspace with someone. So again, not working a full part-time job, but again, sharing that space with someone else may make it easier for you to balance. Some potential organizational myths for students with disabilities. One of my colleagues has coined this syndrome, YLNTM, or you look normal to me. I don't understand what you need. Or people with disabilities will need more training. And as we know, that's not necessarily the case. You're going to select a position where you're going to be successful, and sometimes you just have to clarify that for the employer. I have something to offer you, and this is a position that I can do. Accommodations cannot be made for short-term and or student employment. And this is when we kind of start looking at accommodations on a continuum. You may not get your preferred accommodation if you're in a position for 4 months, but is there a reasonable alternative available to you so that you can perform the essential requirements of the task without maybe having your preferred accommodation, and then lessening the burden of cost to the employer. And which brings me to the next point, accommodations are too expensive. And as we know, in research being done, most accommodations are less than $500, which to an employer is negligible when they look at what you're going to produce for them. And then a big point is you may need to demystify disability. With people with varying ranges of understanding in what a disability is and how you may function in a work setting and what your needs are, you may need to disclose that, and if that's the case, you may have to demystify some of that to the employer. I wanted to highlight some of the top qualities that employers are seeking. Of course, your communication skills, and that's verbal and written. And you may have a strength in one area and you may have challenges in another area, but are you able to communicate efficiently in a professional way? And don't underestimate your post-secondary education. You're communicating all the time. You're communicating to instructors, you're communicating to colleagues, your teaching assistants. So you're doing this all the time, and don't undermine what you're doing in your education as potential experience. Your work ethic. Are you going to show up and actually do something while you're at work? Ideally, that's what an employer is looking for. So you want to demonstrate that to an employer. If you successfully completed part of your degree or your diploma, you've demonstrated some work ethic already. You've completed a piece of that, and don't undervalue what you're doing. Of course, the ability to work well with others. As more employers are using teams of people working together, can you work with other people? Are you going to be able to share jobs and collaborate on different tasks? And do you have initiative? So are you going to sit back and watch things happen, or are you going to bring sort of a fresh set of eyes? Are you going to be, thinking about things in a different way with maybe your degree is different than somebody else's? What can you contribute that's different? And are you going to do that? And finally, your ability to relate well to others. In a customer service position, for example, do you know how to handle the questions that you may not have heard before? How are you going to manage with that? How are you going to problem solve and really come to a meaningful solution for the client? But don't forget, you have something to offer employees. And it's important to think about, what are you looking for as well? You want to enjoy your work. Fair enough. I think we all go to post-secondary in a field we like because we want to have a job that we're going to enjoy. There's a sense of honesty and fairness in the employer. You want to see someone who's respecting you and respecting what you can contribute, but you don't want to see sort of a difference with yourself and your future colleagues. And of course, an employer that employs ethical business practices, it's a lot easier to feel that you want to contribute when you feel that they're also using ethical practices. What's the benefits package like? Leaving post-secondary, that's a huge consideration. Do I have job security? Am I going to have a health plan that's going to cover my medical needs? So again, sort of doing that research ahead of time and knowing that about your employer before you start your job. And finally, of course, an employer that provides stability and security. So you want to have a position that, it's not going to come in on Monday morning and say, by the way, your job is done today. So of course, having an employer that is forthcoming with what they have to offer, but also having that stability. So just to kind of think, when you start thinking about your job search and say, hey, Julie was talking about all this work experience I need to get, and there's kind of a way to look at that is for not undervaluing your skills. You can think, oh, I have to go to work. That sucks. It really doesn't sound very fun. But if we shift that a little bit and say, I actually kind of want to work. There's lots that I can learn in the job setting, and I kind of want to find out what that's all about. And if you take that a step further, I get to go to work. I get to go try different things. I get to experience different settings. And just kind of making that shift mentally, I think, could have a potential benefit in your job search yourself, as thinking about it in a different way as opposed to, oh, I have to go to work today. You can think, if I actually get to go to work today, great. I have a quote here. To accomplish great things, we must not only act, but also dream. Not only plan, but also believe. This is by Anatole France. And I think that's important to kind of keep in mind. Don't undermine what you have to offer. Think big. Take a chance that you're going to get there. And who knows, you may get there or you may learn something along the way. So a few places to go for help so you're not kind of left with all these questions for yourself. Of course, online job search sites. I think that kind of goes without saying, but I felt I had to put it up there. We tend to go online first for everything, and why not your job search? Your post-secondary institution likely has a career center or some sort of career services available. Those are experts in the field willing to help you, and they're on campus. Why not stop in after a class or make it a point of connecting with a counselor there and seeing what they have to offer? If nothing else, you'll know that you've been to that resource. Your disability services office. I know we're constantly being connected with employers are asking us, do you have any graduates or do you have any students looking to work in this particular area? Well, if we don't know of anybody, it's hard to answer that question. So why not contact your disability services office and see what kind of contacts they have in the community? Don't underestimate people. Your family, your friends, your classmates, your instructors, your teaching assistants, your great aunt, Selma. Talk to people. You never know who's going to know of someone who's hiring, someone who has an opportunity for you, even if it's just temporary. If it's just to go talk to someone, you never know who you're going to meet through them. And finally, community agencies or professional organizations. There's tons of organizations in the community that are dedicated to helping people find meaningful employment, but the biggest thing is to access those resources. Find out what's available and actually go take that step and find them and chat with them and see what they have to offer you. And I left my contact information in case anyone has any questions that aren't answered in the Q&A. Certainly feel free to contact me as well.